We begin the program with that exclusive story about some tensions within the Conservative Party and accusations of muzzling MPs. Christian Noel is a reporter with Radio-Canada, and he joins me now in the studio. Christian, fascinating story. What exactly are you hearing about what's happening inside the Conservative caucus over this?
There's a lot of rumbling. There's a lot of frustration because MPs feel that they're being told that they cannot do their job, which is helping the mayors, helping their communities, accessing funds that they need to build new houses or to build a seniors' home, for example. Here's what happened. When Pierre Poilievre in October announced that he wanted to scrap the GST on the sale of new builds under $1 million, he said, I'm going to pay for that promise by scrapping the Housing Accelerator Fund. Right. That is a fund that the Liberals have in place right now. And it seems to be pretty popular because some Conservative MPs have already written to the housing ministers asking for the share of the pie for their own municipalities in their own ridings. And of course, the Liberals kind of gloated a little bit about that and tried to make fun of Pierre Poilievre, saying, well, if your own MPs are asking for money for their own municipalities, I guess that fund is not as bad as you're saying it is. And that embarrassed Pierre Poilievre, and he didn't like that, and he wanted to go back on top. And to do that, he distributed to the media a letter naming 17 Conservative MPs that had asked for funds for their municipalities. Right. And he said they made a mistake. They didn't know that the Liberals were lying to them, and now they know better, and they're never going to ask again for that fund. And that didn't sit well with some of the MPs because that letter went out and they were named without knowing this was going out, and they feel they are being muzzled for partisanship purposes, and they cannot help their municipalities to get the money they need. And just the fact that this story bubbled up all the way to us, to the media, in a caucus that is usually pretty airtight, it tells you that the rumbling is real and the frustration is real.
That's interesting because the Liberals were sort of pushing back against Poilievre's criticism of the Housing Accelerator Fund by releasing the names of Conservative MPs sort of one at a time. He proactively did all of them.
To stop the drip, drip, drip.
But without checking with them. They didn't even know this was going to happen. That's an interesting move that may explain their frustration.
And so the message, which is you cannot advocate for your own municipalities, is frustrating to some of the Conservatives I've spoken with. But also the method is, they feel that it went too far.
Okay, it's interesting because you're now hearing this from Conservative MPs. 178 municipalities have signed agreement with the federal government on the Housing Accelerator Fund, and they say some of them say they want this program to stay in place. You've been speaking to some of the mayors in the communities that could be affected by all of this. What are they saying to you?
Some of them ask for the money. Some of them are getting ready for the second round.
Right.
And they were feeling that having the support of their MP might help their chance of getting more money from the federal government. But now the mayors, they feel surprised and disappointed. Surprised because from what the letter is saying, their MP will no longer be allowed to help them with that process. And disappointed because that's what they expect from their MP, to advocate on behalf of their community. And it seems that right now they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Here's what some of the mayors have to say.
I'm going to ask him to try to put the partisanship aside and whatever request was put forward on behalf of municipalities in our region, to follow through on those. If he started that process, you should finish that process.
I think it's irresponsible. The responsibility, both ethically and by their job, is to advocate for the constituents in their riding. Whether the program available was put in place by your party or another party is irrelevant.
Now, David, we tried to contact the 17 MPs that were named by the leader of the official opposition's letter. We received no replies. We contacted the Pierre Poilievre's office. We received no replies. But it sounds to me like those two groups, the 17 MPs and the other MPs not named in that letter that also feel frustrated, and the leader of the opposition do have a little bit of talking to do to sort things out, that's for sure.
All right, interesting story. That's Radio-Canada's Christian Noel. Okay, we're going to speak to one of those mayors that you just heard from there. Alan Brown is the mayor of Butternut Valley in New Brunswick, and he joins me now. Mayor Brown, thanks for being here today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
What does your community want from the Housing Accelerator Fund? What projects do you need this money for?
We are applying to the Housing Accelerator Fund to facilitate the development of sewage and municipal water. Our community is vastly rural. It has a few small hotspots of concentration for population, We'd like to see those developed more, and the only way to do that would be to put in municipal water and sewage so that we can increase the density and not incur costs for a larger system spread out over greater areas.
So this will allow you to build the infrastructure that will then allow you to have more houses built in your community. That's the way this works. You see this money as a key first step to getting more houses built in your town?
Yes, it's a first step is to get the infrastructure. There's not much point building houses if they're not going to be able to be serviced. And so part of it would be rezoning or dealing with zoning issues. And once we get the infrastructure in, then we have developers that would build multi-units, which would address rental issues and alleviate some of the pressure for housing in the area.
So your MP is a Conservative. Rob Moore is your Member of Parliament. And according to what my colleague Christian Noel with Radio Canada is reporting, is that he is being told, along with other MPs, not to support funding applications from the Housing Accelerator Fund. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've said it before that it's irresponsible. But what I do not like is the tacit implication that comes with it that if we, in the next election, they form government, don't vote in a member of parliament of their party, we're not going to be looked at for any of the programs that they may run. It doesn't matter if that's what they intend, but that's how it comes across, and that is disturbing.
The leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Poilievre, has said the Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually help build more housing. What do you say to that criticism of this program?
I think the issue is that you have, when you're in opposition, you can criticize everything. You don't have to come up with anything concrete until you're into an election. Mm-hmm. To say that this doesn't build housing when we know for a fact that it facilitates the process to allow housing to be built, it may not put a dollar into a house directly, but if the infrastructure isn't there, if the work isn't done, if you can't support the planning process to allow for the housing to be developed in a reasonable and responsible manner, then all the bonuses that you want to throw out there are meaningless because a house in the middle of nowhere doesn't do any good.
Okay, so the Conservative plan is to scrap the GST from newly built homes costing less than $1 million. Would that be a helpful policy for your community? Presumably, most of these houses would be below $1 million. Would it be helpful, and how does it compare to the Housing Accelerator Fund?
It would be helpful in that it would spur development for single unit housing and some smaller rental unit buildings. I don't know how it would apply as far as like a 6-unit, 8-unit build. Chances are they're going to be over $1 million, and whether that's considered commercial and wouldn't qualify. And we have no idea what their plan is. They just come out with a catchphrase that's the tax on 1 million or less. So it's hard to judge how that's going to affect things, and it still relies on people getting the funding. And my understanding is that the GST would probably go back to the developer, lowering the cost of the sale of the house. But I don't know. The Housing Accelerator Fund is more geared towards municipal development, and the GST is more towards individual build development. The housing problem has no simple solution. There's no one fix. It would take a myriad of programs, and to say that this is going to be the fix, I don't think is complete. And municipalities have a huge infrastructure deficit right now, and it needs to be addressed as well.
Right, that's why development fees are going up so much. It's to pay for things like the sewer that the money you would get from the Housing Accelerator Fund covers the cost.
Exactly.
So your MP, Conservative Rob Moore, have you spoken to him about this, about being told that you can't advocate for funding for you and other communities under this Housing Accelerator Fund? Have you talked to your MP?
Yes, I have talked to MP Moore, and we discussed this whole issue. And in the past, the names of MPs that have advocated for opposition for programs has never really been brought on under the floor. And when the Liberals did that, they sort of created this little tempest in a teapot. But by putting out the thing that we're not going to support anything now, they've just added fire and brought the tea kettle back to a boil again. It's happened all along that the MPs advocate for their constituents.
Right.
And to say we're not going to do that now is irresponsible. Rob Moore has always advocated for us throughout the Liberal tenure. And we know that if given his chance, he would continue to do so. I think it's just partisan policy and partisan politics, and it's municipalities that are going to pay the price for it.
Did MP Moore tell you whether he was going to comply with the orders from his leader? I mean, he's stuck in a tough situation of advocating for you and his constituents, but also towing the line that the party leader has imposed on him. So what did he tell you he's going to do?
He hasn't. I haven't discussed this current blackout on support with him. I expect that he'll toe the party line because if they're being whipped into it, he has to. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice on that. But I would hope that when other things come up, he will continue to advocate, because it was specific that it was just the Housing Accelerator Fund. So I expect that if something else comes along or if there's another issue, he will continue to advocate for us.
Are you worried? Are you worried, though, not having your MP on side could cost you some money here? I mean, I know municipalities can do these deals directly with the government, but MPs advocate for their constituents all the time, and now you won't have that help. Are you worried it could cost you some cash here, sir?
I don't know. That's speculating, but I am worried about the precedent that this sets and how it just drives the divide in politics even further. And to me, that is the biggest issue out of all of this. To hold us hostage for their own partisan games is, well, it's disgusting, really.
Mayor Alan Brown of Butternut Valley in New Brunswick, I want to thank you for your time today, sir. Good luck getting the houses built. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, David.